This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Thursday. Yeah, I'm back in the studio, which feels good. We were down in Calgary earlier this week where I got to be in the Silver Gold Bull headquarters, do a podcast out of there. And that's where I bring in we were talking older circulation. They call it junk silver. It's silver. It's just coins like dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars from back before our government debased our money by removing the silver from our coinage. Yeah. It's today's silver's junk silver. I think of the stuff that they're talking about. It's silver. It's silver. What are you going to do? Either way, the reason why we're talking about this silver is, with the price of silver skyrocketing, these coins are, a nice for a barter economy, right? Do we ever get there? Certainly hope not. But if we ever did, having a little bit of this in your pocket or in your safe or under your mattress or wherever you stick it is a nice sleep at night insurance policy. It's small coins essentially for bartering with, and they got deals on that. You can text or email Grahame right now. Bumped into Grahame. He says hello, everyone. Appreciates you guys reaching out to him. You can reach out to Grahame down in the show notes if you got any questions around junk silver, buying, selling, storing, using your retirement accounts to invest in precious metals. Just hit him up and he can get you all the answers. Anytime you're on Silver Gold Bull, doesn't matter if you're stateside or north here of the border. So .ca.com. Either way, just make sure to reference the SNP when you're making your purchases. Here in March in Lloydminster, well, it's like +5 today right now, and it was just like -18. And if there's one thing about March, you can make sure it's gonna, or for sure you can put on your calendar is gonna happen. It's gonna be fluctuations in the weather, and you also can count on Guardian Plumbing and Heating. These guys have been keeping homes and farms and businesses running smoothly since 2010. And farmers, this one's just for you. Guardian's efficient grain dryers and Guardian power stations aren't just available here. They're available all across Canada. The power station is an absolute game changer, giving you 2-for-1 utilities, heat and electricity from the same reliable system. It's an innovative way to keep your operations running efficiently and save on energy costs. For more information, go to guardianplumbing.ca. Ignite Distribution out of Wainwright, Alberta. When it comes to running your business, Shane Stafford and crew are going to make sure that you don't run out of all the things. And in a world right now with just a whole bunch of crazy going on, you want to make sure that you don't overlook different parts of your business. And we're talking all the little things, odds and ends that make it run. That's what Shane Stafford keeps track of. Of course, he had the big sale with Wix. That's come and gone. But now here for the remainder of the year, when it comes to making sure that your business is running properly, if you got to keep things in stock, parts in place, that type of thing, give him a call. Shane Stafford, 780-842-3433. If you're looking to revolutionize your farm game this spring, AgriLogix. Oh man, that's AgriLogix. Okay. Your region's certified DJI large sprayer and enterprise drone dealer has you covered. Meet the DJI Agri's T50 package, a massive 40-kilogram spray payload, a 50-kilogram spreading capacity with dual atomizing nozzles for precision coverage. And they pair it with the DJI Mavic M3M multispectral. Its cutting-edge RGB and multispectral cameras deliver real-time crop health insights like never before, and they're kicking off demos this spring as soon as the weather warms up. Book yours now to see these beasts in action. You can give Jeff a call at 780-870-4236. Plus, you can sign up for their advanced drone license training. Their expert trainer, trusted by the National RCMP, military, and city police and fire departments, will get farmers and pros like you certified and ready to soar at RockyMountainDrones.ca. Contact AgriLogix today, and let's take your operations to new heights. There's a new one for you. There you go, okay? If you missed all that, because I rattled off a lot, call Jeff, 780-870-4236. Substack, if you haven't subscribed to, Sunday nights, 5 p.m., we've been doing the Week in Review, and that's free to anyone who wants to subscribe. Some different thoughts on the Cornerstone Forum, that type of thing. If you become a paid member, you can start to see these new things we've been doing, the debrief. Oh, come on, Shaun, spit it out. Essentially, as soon as I finish today's episode with Steve, I do a video debrief and it gets put on for paid subscribers. So if that's of interest to you, we've been having interesting discussions in the background of Substack behind the paywall, and would love to have you find folks over there. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to retweet. Make sure to do all the things. And I know you get tired of me saying that, but it does help. It truly does. And I appreciate you guys' help on this. All right, let's get on to that tale of the tape. He's a former information warfare officer and cyber defense battalion commander. I'm talking about retired Lieutenant Colonel Steven Murray. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Steven Murray. Sir, thanks for hopping on.
Oh, always a pleasure, my friend. Always.
Well, I was driving home from Calgary last night, and as I'm driving, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what Steve thinks about all this stuff going on with Canada, the United States, because the last time I had you on, I thought you were going to say one thing, and then you threw me a left hook, and you're like, Canadians, wake up. We can't have one big conglomerate of a country that's in Agenda 2030, and then it's kind of ebbed and flowed up on this side. There's been a lot of talk out here in Alberta, and I thought I had Tom Luong go on, and I thought I wonder what Steve's got to say about this. And we don't have to stick on that for very long, or we can for a long time. It doesn't matter to me. Your name came up in conversation, and that's why I reached out.
You know, so I reached out to Tom after the interview because I love watching those two guys because, first of all, Tom and Alex are wicked smart guys, right? So you listen to them and you're like, didn't think about that, didn't think about that, didn't think about that. But I want to touch on two things related to this. So, no, I think Canada needs to stay its own country. I unequivocally think that Canada should stay its own country and not be a part of the EU, not be a part of the US, because the identity of the country and the culture of the country shouldn't change. That said, you have a lot of liberals up there that are retarded, and they're just retarded. Totally bought into the whole psyop. Totally bought into the whole narrative. Can't get out of it. Retarded, right? So here's the systemic issues that I see that need to be solved in order for the U.S. and the EU and Canada to all live and peacefully coexist. First of all, you need to get rid of the Chinese. The Chinese have to go. Chinese infrastructure, Chinese protection details, they all need to go from both the U.S. as well as from Canada and across Europe. They're everywhere. That's the first thing. The second thing is you can't join the EU. The EU is retarded too. It's run by pedophiles. It's run by crazy people. I don't know why you would want to sign up for that. Just look at what they're doing to the UK and Ireland right now. I mean, we had an MMA fighter in the White House. When was the last time you saw that? I don't even have words for that. Talk about denigrating the office of the president. I mean, he's probably a nice guy, but you put an MMA fighter up talking about what's going on in Ireland because you don't have diplomatic relationships with the Irish government. Come on, there's too many parts about that don't add up. Then the whole discussion around Greenland, which is retarded, because you're going to take a Danish colony and you're going to say that, yep, be a part of the U.S. You'll be richer. Okay, how's that working out for the Americans right now? Are Americans any richer because of this leadership? No. So I think the whole conversation, to be perfectly honest, is just like Tom says, it's maneuvering, and it's Trump really pimping everybody else to get a reaction out of him, and nothing more. I don't think he's serious about Greenland. I don't think he's serious about the two countries joining. What I do think he's serious about is making sure that the EU doesn't expand over to Canada and North America. There's definitely a fight going on there. I don't know who it's between. I don't think it's between governments. I think it's between elite. And one other thing that I wanted to talk through that I thought, first of all, Tom was channeling me during his rants about civility, because I even said that to him. I said, I was channeling through you because that's exactly how I see the world. One of the biggest criticisms I get is I'm very raw. I don't talk around the problem. I talk right to it, and I'll call a spade a spade. And I do that because Tom's right. Civility is a construct to keep you away from criticizing or being direct about anything related to the UK or the British Empire. And right now, to me, they're the biggest threat to the rest of the world. They're rapidly becoming a Muslim country. And the fact that you have a king now doing celebrating Ramadan, that's a pretty substantial shift in both policy as well as culture. And I don't see how the British people are okay with that, especially given the fact that this guy openly hates his own subjects. Like, can you make it more obvious? And I won't even go down the road of the satanic picture that their portrait of him that they unveiled, because I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was shocked when he saw it. But that said, could that be any more satanic? So there's a host of issues around all this, but I really think this is a conflict between two different sets of elites, and that's where it lands, how it lands, I don't know. But I think it all revolves around currency. I think it all revolves around debt. And I think it all revolves around who's going to be the dominant force. And Tom talks about Cypher and LIBOR. I think I pronounced that right. And how that's a resurgence of LIBOR and how they want to, offload the debt to Europe, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how much of that's true, but I think Tom's right. I think ultimately this is about currency. That's where my head's at. That's a long answer for a short question, but there's a lot wrapped up in there.
Well, it's interesting because on this side, we've been, when you first came on and talked about Canada not like you should not do that.
No,
I think most Canadians would agree with you. But then as it goes on and you see us starting to align with Europe, I think Western Canada is like, we got to get the hell out of here. This is not no. What they're doing over there, aligning us with Europe, Freeland talking about putting nuclear powers on the, aligning with that. You're like, what are we doing? What are we actually doing? Now we got King Carney or whatever you want to call him, whatever nickname you want. We got Carney sitting there. Now is the new prime
he's
minister.
Dark Sidious. That's who he is. Dark
Yeah,
Sidious.
the Dark Lord.
He is. He's obviously a plant, and I've said this. I say this. I get criticized for it all the time. They always replace one terrible leader with another. Trudeau was terrible in so many different ways. So the communist thing didn't sell. So now they're off to let's go join the EU. At the bottom, at the end of the day, they need to write down the debt. They need to reset the currency. So they're going to do whatever it takes to reset the currency, but at the same time, they don't want the resources to go to the U.S. And I I vehemently oppose to geographic economic zones that are run by bankers. And look, and let me just clarify this so everybody's on the same page. I'm not a Trump fan. I don't care about who the renter in the White House is. That's a 4-year minimum security prison sentence for anybody that signs up for it, and you're controlled by handlers. I know that because I've worked in that entire area for most of my career. The Pentagon, all the agencies. Trust me when I say this. The president's not in charge. He makes decisions, but a lot of things across his desk he doesn't even read. Here, President, sign this. Here, Mr. President, sign this. Here, Mr. President, sign this. Right? So get away from Trump and his trolling. The real issue here is what kind of a culture do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a culture where clearly they're moving towards a communist country? Because that's what it is. All of the EU is communist now with the censorship. And I've been banned for life in the EU. I won't even travel to the EU because I'm sure as soon as I get off the plane, I'll get rolled up. That's how bad it's gotten. And because I've been openly criticizing the Crown, Parliament, all the leadership over there, the WHO, you name it. I've criticized all of them. And do you want to live in that kind of a country? Because that's where you're headed if you go to the EU. And then the other question is, and I've said this to Americans too, because we're facing the same question. We have a technocracy that they're trying to build in the background. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all those guys. They put on a good face, right? Doge is doing yeoman's work. But at the same time, Palantir's taking over. And part of the reason why I left the military is I saw a lot of this moving in the right direction and nobody was listening. And I, purposely said, look, we're building all this infrastructure to track terrorists. And we're tracking more Americans than we are tracking terrorists. So tell me how this is helpful to national security. This is detrimental because at some point, leaders change, the pendulum shifts, and guess what? You have somebody on the other side that hates Americans and they're collecting on Americans. And I spent the last 2 years of my career arguing with general officers. It's one of the reasons why I didn't take a promotion and go to, take a flag somewhere, for the simple reason that I couldn't willingly go along with collecting on American citizens. I got under my skin like a rash. And that's what you're signing up for if you go to Europe. So, and we're going to have to, at some point, this will be a revolution here. Let me just call a spade a spade. At some point, we're going to pick up arms against this government. I don't care who's in charge, because they've been in office 58 days now. Nobody's been arrested. Nobody of significance has been fired. Nobody's been perp walked. And the whole Epstein debacle, which, let me just zero in on that for a second so everybody kind of gets a flavor for why this is important. It's not so much the Epstein files that are important. It's who's the belly button that ran the blackmail ops, and we all know who it is and why they're obfuscating it, because it came out today in the JFK release. The only thing the CIA wanted scrubbed from all of the records was Israel's involvement. What was Mossad's involvement in Epstein? It's widely believed that Mossad ran the operation because Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was a Mossad asset. You can make the leap. And if that's the case, and they're scrubbing the books right now, we're never going to see any justice. And Trump's created an existential crisis for himself. At the end of the day, Americans want accountability. They want people to see justice. And I'm not talking just the Clintons or the Obamas. And those whole clans, the whole Obama clan, the whole Clinton clan, they don't just need to come to justice. I want to know who was the puppet master behind Barack Obama, because he's truly the Manchurian candidate. He was truly controlled as a CIA asset by John Brennan. I want to know who was controlling John Brennan. All those questions have to be answered in Trump's term. Otherwise, he will be the most despised president in American history. And he's already separated himself from his base by supporting Israel to an extreme. Most of the American public's like, we didn't vote for this. But if you go back to his convention, you can see that his whole convention was about make Israel great again. And Americans didn't sign up for that. And you're seeing the growing resentment every day, more and more. And the same should be true in Canada. And my point of saying all this is, what's your line in the sand? What is the line that they cross? What is the freedom they take away from you that drives you to pick up arms against your government? Because we have a moral, I'm a field grade officer. I have a moral obligation to defend the Constitution at all costs. So my line in the sand is, when they purposely get us into a war, purposely sell us down the river, purposely crash our economy, guess what? I'll be the head of the insurgency. And that's the question you have to ask, is what's the line in the sand for us? And then how do we organize to go against this, right? You don't have to pick up arms to bring the country to a standstill. You can go full stop. Like, you know why they were so scared of the truckers? I could tell you why they were so scared of the truckers. And it wasn't the horns, it was the solidarity that was growing across the country for them. They knew if it got to a certain point, they couldn't control it, and it would be a civil war. They knew it. That's why they clamped down so hard. And it was all about fear and intimidation. What I will contend to you, there's not enough of them to stop all of us. And you bring a country full stop and stop everything economically, guess what? You're going to have the mic and you're going to dictate what you want. So you don't have to pick up arms, but there's a lot of things you could do to disrupt their operations. And that's really the question Canada should ask right now. What's our line in the sand? Because if Mark Carney wanted to join the EU, trust me, I'd take that country full stop in a nanosecond. And I would make it painful, especially for the elite in Ottawa that seem to control your entire parliament. I would make it so painful for them. I would target every one of their businesses and I would shut them down for weeks. No commerce, no money. Guess what? They'll feel that. You look like you're deep in thought, which is priceless.
Well, I just in one breath, I appreciate the sentiment. In another breath, I'm like, I went to Ottawa. You know, was there 10,000 people there? Was there 20,000 people there? You know, how many thousands of people there? I'll give it this: the entire country and maybe the entire world stood and watched for 20 some days. You know, like they paid attention.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't know. I go. The way my brain plays out the next little bit is here in Canada, it's weird. And I said this to Tom and I'll say it again, right? Like, we don't have a set election date. Yeah, isn't that a weird thing to just like admit? Nobody can tell me right this moment. Everyone's like, oh, there's signaling of an election coming. Like, great.
That's a bunch of
Okay.
BS. That's what most communist dictators do is they signal they're going to do an election and then you go vote for them and they vote themselves back in like Maduro did.
Sure.
How's that any different?
So
It's just the same game.
So we're staring at this, and I'm like, well, I don't know. Justin Trudeau was, a moron, but a clever moron, and he found a way to stay in power for quite some time, and he did a lot of bad to this country. And then on the world stage, he wasn't great, but he had handlers just like everybody else. And then you see Mark Carney get plopped in, bloop, and you're like, holy crap! Like, to me, I'm like, holy crap! Anybody else seeing this? Canadians just cruising along, and once again, audience, I know you're there, and I know there's a lot of people staring at this going, holy crap.
But
But
the
there's like
people
this,
listening to you are not the problem, right? They're
correct.
awake. They're listening to you. It's all the other morons that are on the left that are like signed up to go get their next booster that don't have any idea that their health problems that are declining are correlated to the two because somebody on TV told them that, hey, everything's fine. Everything's awesome. Never mind the walls of the house are on fire. The windows are all blown out. Front doors off the hinges. Everything's fine. Everything's awesome. Don't worry about it. That's the U.S. too. It's not just there. And that is the downstream effects of a highly effective information operations campaign to influence the public. And they've done it across every media, right? So some people I don't blame. And the part of the other problem is, and I talked about this last night in my situation report. There's no source of truth, period, anywhere on the planet. I only know of two sources of truth in the U.S. that are actually doing journalism. I mean, real journalism. That's the Washington Pundit and Revolver.news. Those are the only two sources that I know of that actually vet all their sources before they print anything and publish anything. And knowing Dr. Easy and the staff over at Washington Pundit, I can tell you that their stated objective is to publish everything with sources that they could back up in court. That's journalism. That's the way it's supposed to work. And Adam Carter over there, I've been trading messages with him for, I don't know, 3-4 years now. And I asked him, what's the hardest thing to source? He said the truth, because there's so much obfuscation. There's so much misdirection, so many lies. It's hard to sift your way through it. And you got to give him, Tracy Beans is another, but she's more focused on the political spectrum than actually on events, right? And everything that they're publishing is after the fact. So there's really no source of truth for the current moment. And that's what most populations need. And I'll give you, for instance, of why this is important. For the last, I don't know, 100 years, we've been told that there's nothing under the pyramids, that the pyramids were built by slaves with, shovels and with, pulleys, etc. And just yesterday, there was a release, and I think it was Greg Miller that did it. I'll tell you exactly who it was. But they did synthetic aperture radar against one of the pyramids. And again, I haven't vetted this to see if it's actually true, but if Greg's putting it out, I'm pretty sure that it's real. anyway, the point is that I think it's Greg Miller. Anyway, um, the point is they did a synthetic aperture radar scan of the pyramids and realized that there's structures that go 2 meters down underneath it that are perfectly in line north to south in 2 columns of 4. And there's 5 structures within the center of it that are all symmetrical and all aligned as well. Guys with picks and hammers, 3,000 years ago are not going to be able to do that. So obviously there's something about the pyramids we haven't been told, and there's obviously new information that's going to galvanize and change what we think about history. And I'll make the premise to you that 90% of what we've been told about our history is a lie anyway. And half of what you're hearing right now is a lie. The other half is obfuscation, and maybe 1% of it's true. And I'll use a real world example, or I can say that for a fact. I was told so I got a call from Iraq. A guy that I used to work with called me and said, "Hey, I need your help. Are you willing to volunteer and come over here and do an assignment over here?" This was 2004. This is January 2004. And I said, "Yeah, I'll make the request at G3 tomorrow." So, it took me 4 months to get on the ground. Finally got on the ground over there. Everything I had been told when I got on the ground in Texas was a complete lie. There was no plan. The Coalition Provisional Authority didn't have enough manpower, didn't have enough organization, didn't have anything to be able to operate the country. We were still basically in charge. And that 911 services and a few other services that we said were up were that was a sham. So even the stuff that we were hearing going into country was a sham. And if I apply that same logic to everything else that I've been told, I can tell you that 99% of what you're hearing right now is a complete lie, along with our history. Complete lie. So I think what we're in the process of seeing is we're seeing 3 things. We're seeing the collapse of Western civilization as the control grid, the legacy control grid collapses, right? Because they're losing control. And what do control freaks try and do when they lose more control? They try and garner more control. So we're watching that, both Europe, the US, as well as Canada, and the Eastern countries, as well as China. All those systems are starting to implode. And we're probably well on the way to imploding, regardless of what Trump wants, regardless of how much Doge saves, how much spending we cut. Doesn't matter. I think the die is already cast. We're also seeing at the same time a bunch of disclosure around a lot of different topics right now. And I'm not just talking about the UFO stuff. I'm talking about historical things that have been obfuscated. The pyramids that's just one piece. And and I'm just going to say, if that's just 1% true and there's structures underneath the pyramids, that's earth changing. That changes everything we know about history in a nanosecond. And then it conjures up the question, what were the pyramids really for? Why is there alignment in a certain order? Why are they set up with structures underground? Are they power sources? Are they big honking space guns? What are they? What were they designed to do? Because there's obviously a purpose if there's underground structures with a support system, right? And you don't have to be an engineer to figure that out. So my point of this is, and then the third thing is, with the disclosure, we're going to see a cultural change and a cultural shift that most of us probably won't be expecting the direction it goes in. And I think, I'm not going to say enlightenment because that's kind of a hokey woo word, but I think the culture across the planet is going to change because of some of these disclosures. And I've been told personally that there's going to be technology released within the next 6 months that's going to revolutionize the way we live. Okay, I'll believe it when I see it. But, when you hear that from people inside the system that you've worked with for years, you pay attention to it, right? So I've heard it from a couple of different sources now inside the system. I don't know how true it is. I don't know if it's operational. I don't know. But the fact that I can't think of one of the big contractors from Iraq just released battery technology that supposedly revolutionizes lithium-ion batteries. That's part of the disclosure as far as I'm concerned. They're slowly releasing technology that's going to change the way we operate. And I'll use a case in point so people can see where I'm going with this. Imagine a battery that lasts 40 years. So you buy one battery, it lasts 40 years. You don't have to worry about replacing it. Think about how that would revolutionize electric cars. Think about how that would revolutionize everything in your home that requires a battery. You go from having 300 batteries in your house to having 1 or 2 or 4. That would revolutionize the way we live. And it would change the way we do recycling, change the way we do, disposal of goods and services, along with, the topic that's been in is anti-gravitic. So let's say we've mastered anti-gravity. Imagine what that would do to the building industry, the vehicle industry, the shipping industry, the airline industry overnight. It would change the entire world overnight. And I think that would change our culture in ways that we probably can't comprehend right now. So I look back at the development of the aircraft, right? And I look at how the aircraft over 10 years completely revolutionized the way we as humans lived and traveled on the planet. And I can only imagine how fast that incremental change will exponentially change the culture if that's true. Like you can have a house that doesn't need to be on a foundation. It can literally levitate, which means it's impervious to earthquakes. I mean, you still have to deal with weather, but with anti-gravity comes other things too, right? So you can see where I'm going with that, right? It just the release of some of those technologies would revolutionize the way we live. And it would also destroy the control grid because it would drive things in a direction that the elite can't control. And I think it's going to do a lot to change religion as well. So we'll see. This year it's the interesting thing this year is if you talk to anybody, and I know you're going to talk to Sharita, so I'll leave the numerology piece of it to her. But
she's told you that I finally got in touch with her, did she?
oh yeah, I talk to her every day because look, I need to put this out too, right? Because I've taken a lot of flack on her. Never mind my four-legged wrecking crew behind me. She's my neurotic one. Um, if she's not doing something, she's digging or chewing into something. She's a working dog, so got to keep her busy. Um, but the numerology aspect is what the elites use to plan their events. It's what they use to plan their calendar. It's what they use to align with the satanic calendar. And look, it's not my domain. I don't understand it. And she'll tell you, she'll be the first one to tell you. In fact, you should ask her, do you have to chip it down for the colonel? And she will tell you, yes, I have to chip it down for him. Because I don't get it. It's not my domain. I've tried to study it. I've tried to figure it out. And I still, to this day, I cannot figure it out. It's just not in my wheelhouse. But if somebody can figure that out, figure out how the enemy plans, I can tell you we can disrupt all their operations in a nanosecond. And that's really where we need to be. So yeah, I kind of went tangential on there, but I see those three things happening this year and next year, and I it's like a freight train the elite can't stop. It's going to change us in ways we just can't imagine right now. So yeah, I'll just leave that there.
Well, it's in one breath, Steve, it's a hopeful look, right? Like you're talking about monumental things going on and the fact that it would disrupt the elites. I just feel like the elites will try and control it. Why do you have the sense that the elites won't be able to get ahead of this and find ways to just do what they've always done?
Because I think the difference is, and let me circle back a little bit. So the one thing I've seen since January 1st, so I was going to walk away from all this online stuff back in January, go live my life, go live a quiet life with a beautiful woman and just call it good. That's really what I wanted to do, right? And I've said all along, if things go peacefully and we transition to Trump and things are peaceful, I'm going to stop doing this and go back to my life and go play with guns and do my thing as a gunsmith. But what I've realized is a lot of people are waking up. And I use this example because it's priceless. My sister was a staunch liberal. I mean, staunch liberal. And my older brother pointed her to Mike Benz. And so I get this phone call. I'm tinkering around my house. I get this phone call from my sister. She goes, I owe you an apology. I'm like, what for? Because I was so wrong and you were so right. He goes, I listened to Mike Benz. You know who he is? I go, yeah, I've talked to Mike on the phone several times. He's a nice guy. He's like, my God, he's talking. And I'm like, that's what Steve said. That's what Steve said. That's what Steve said. That's what you were saying this stuff 10 years ago. And I go, yeah, you're crazy till you're not. I said, but now you're awake. So what are you going to do? She goes, I'm going to go tell all my friends to listen to this guy. And I'm going to start, evangelizing to listen to Mike Benz and to a few others that you recommended so people really realize what's going on. And I think we're seeing a tidal shift in the population waking up. And it's only going to accelerate. And the other part of that is, as people, and this is why I talked about the line in the sand. I think when they try and implement some of these control grids, the one thing I learned in Iraq is that the enemy was ingenious at communication. So no matter how much they try to limit and censor communication, I mean, we went to the extremes to shut down social media, to shut down radio communication, to jam things. They still found ways to communicate around us, and they were highly effective at it. And it was creative stuff. Like a guy on a bike would run down the road and figure out where all the jammers were, and they would go cut power to it or cut the power lines going into the building. And we thought we were all clever and you know moving stuff around so they couldn't interdict it. They still found it. They still found ways to communicate. They would communicate, but with signals that took us months to figure out how they were doing it. They would use email accounts. They'd go into an email account. They'd have 10 people share it. They'd transfer all their messages in a draft. We weren't intercepting it because they would never get transmit, but they were all getting the messages, and they were using the technology that we were supposedly dominant on. Information superiority, and the nitwits who wrote that down at Leavenworth, I hope they're all fired by now. But the point is that we learned a lot from that about how adaptive the enemy can be. You don't think the Canadian people and American people aren't going to be adaptive? They are going to. One thing I know about North America is that both Canada, and this is true for both the US and Canada, innovation in both countries has always led the world, bar none. The innovation that's come out of the US over the last 50, 60 years and out of Canada has been second to none when it comes to technology and figuring out ways to do things better. You don't think if they tighten the screws down, that guys like me aren't going to go underground and figure out how to go around that? You can bet your ass I am. And I'm just the tip of the iceberg. And I've been in this game a long time, but there's guys that are younger than me that are way smarter, know way more technology, and know all the ways around it. So I don't care if they put their best AI against us, we'll figure out a way around it. And that's how their control grid's going to fail, because these subsystems will create outside of it, and you'll have a black market economy around all of their control grid that they won't be able to control. And that chaos will eventually grow and tip over the system, and they won't be able to do anything about it. If you watch The Matrix, you see this play out in a variety of fashions. But the complexity theory that was written about so many years ago, it really is true. The more complex a system, the easier it is to bring it to its knees. And I've seen it happen time and time again. And watching the Iraqis do their little gyrations to go around all of our countermeasures taught me a lot about the fact that people who want to be free are going to go to whatever length is necessary to ensure that freedom exists. And that's what we're seeing across the planet. But the other part of it is we're seeing across the planet this growing groundswell of people that want accountability. They're tired of the elites over in Europe and the EU because they're completely unaccountable. And they're doubling down right now. That's not going to work out for them when the UK drops into a civil war, especially Ireland's about to tip over, and it's about to go kinetic in Panama. That's not going to go well for them. And it's just a matter of time before that spills over too. You can't control chaos, and they think they can. That's how arrogant these people are, and their arrogance is going to be their undoing. And when it finally is their undoing, you're going to see changes culturally that you probably have never even anticipated seeing. That's why I say this disclosure piece plays a part in it too, because when you're introducing these unstable elements into a semi-stable system, you're only going to get more instability. And we're literally on a knife edge of tipping over multiple cultures right now. The UK is probably closer to civil war than Ireland, but they're both on the edge. And if those two fall into civil war, so does the rest of Europe. And it won't be a civil war with, blue and gray uniforms and guys carrying muskets. This is going to be an asymmetric fight that puts entire countries into chaos. Power grids go down, cyber issues, banking issues, you name it.
When you talk disclosure, and I understand what you mean by disclosure, but where's the disclosure coming from? And what is prompting the disclosure?
That I don't know. It's being driven outside of the normal circles of control. I don't think this is a controlled release. I don't think a lot of these releases are Some of them are planned, some of them are not planned. And if you watch what's going on in the night sky, and I'll use several conversations I've had with airline pilots. When you get out over the Pacific or the Atlantic, you see stuff in space that doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, moving in directions and speeds that don't match anything on the planet. And they're seeing more and more and more of that. Plus, has anybody seen the amount of space debris that's coming back to the planet? How many things have burned up in the atmosphere in the last 2 years? I can tell you there's something going on in space. I don't know what it is. If it's a war, a terrestrial war in space between countries, which is more likely what I think it is, US, Russia, China all fighting it out for dominance in the space, or if it's something else. But I can tell you that the fact that all this stuff is happening is getting harder and harder for them to obfuscate that there's something going on. So I think some of this is being driven out by outside forces. And, I don't mean alien, I mean outside forces outside the US. And some of it's being driven within the US by people that are in the system that know if this disclosure happens, they won't be able to control it and implement their plans. I think it's both. And I think that, and I could be way off base, but I listen to what's being pushed right now on the alien side of the house, which, let's face it, we're not alone. I'm just going to say that out loud. As crazy as that sounds, we're not alone, and people need to get ready for that because if you listen to Stephen Greer was on Alex Jones for 2 hours talking about UFOs, talking about reverse engineered craft, talking about alien contact, talking about you know benevolent and malevolent aliens that we're supposedly in contact with. I don't know how much of that's true, but if you take 1% of that and you look at the possibility that we are in contact with another species, what would that do to the planet and the culture? And more importantly, if you knew that somebody was going to come and make contact with you, you would have to disclose some of this technology so the public's not completely shocked, right? Because their mode of operation since the 40s and 50s, since Roswell, has been the public can't know or there'll be mass panic. That's been their mindset. And I could tell you right now that I would bet you that probably 70% of the population go, that's cool. What are they going to give us? The other 30% would freak out, and that's the extremes on the left and right. They would freak out because they can't change their paradigms. But everybody else in the center would be like, okay, next. That's what it looks like from my perspective right now. And I don't, like I said, I don't know how much of it's real, but I could tell you, have worked in space and worked with satellites and worked with, ICBMs, I can tell you the shit burning up in the atmosphere is not a normal thing. And stuff coming back down, you can say it's a rocket all you want, but there's obviously something going on because things don't burn up in space and burn up in reentry because it's planned. It's usually very unplanned. Like when a satellite's in orbit, right? Either high Earth or low Earth orbit, you have to shoot commands to it. And we've automated that process to keep it on azimuth, right? Because it's always tumbling in space, it's always moving. So the last thing you want to do is give it a command where it turns the antenna away from you and you can't talk to it because then it becomes a dumb missile and you can't control it. And with so much traffic up there in space, things start to hit each other and you've got a traffic jam that's going to come to Earth and cause a lot of damage. So you spend a lot of time commanding satellites and keeping the birds in the air so that they don't hit other things. For things to come down and burn up in the atmosphere, it means either something's terribly wrong with the control grid or there's something else at play and things are there's strikes in orbit. None of that's good for us. So the other thing is it could be kinetic up there. I don't know, but the activity has been unusual, and if you're not paying attention to it, you should.
When you say kinetic in space, like, do you think, like, does your brain go to actual dudes up there, or do you just like probably machine on machine?
It's satellite on satellite. The Chinese and the Russians have weaponized space. If go back to 2016, 2017, when General Raymond was in charge of when they first stood up Space Force, one of the first things he talked about back in 2017, 2018 was we do not want to weaponize space. But he knew way back then that the Chinese and the Russians were building kinetic systems for space. And these are satellites like you saw the IRBM with the rods of God that they used. Imagine that in space. Imagine the kinetic energy of just 10 rods on a target here down on Earth. That would do a tremendous amount of damage. And assume it's already up there. Assume they've already weaponized it. Assume that's why we're playing catch up right now. And assume that that's probably what's going on in space as a satellite on satellite. Do I
I've
think there's
told,
dudes up there in spacesuits? No. Well,
well,
could be.
have I told you about the two lights in the sky? I probably haven't told you this story.
Let's hear it.
I'm driving home with my wife, and we're in the middle of the countryside. You know, only way that in the middle of nowhere Canada can be, folks. And I'm looking, I'm like, what are those two? Like, what are those? And there's two lights side by side up by the moon. And I was thinking stars, and then I was thinking, probably satellites. And then one of them just like straight out of a movie. It's like it was racing away from me as fast as it could and disappeared. Like it warped. I use warped, but I know that I don't know if that's the word, folks. Okay, just like gone. I'm like, oh my god! And I swat my wife. I'm like, did you see that? She's like, see what? I'm like, am I going crazy? I'm like, there was two, now there's one. She's like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I'm like, oh my god, why aren't you interested in this, right? And then she goes back to doing whatever she's doing, and I'm driving, not trying to kill us, watching this last thing, and it does it. Gone. Two of them side by side, zoom, zoom. And I'm like, what was that? Like, what
That was
was
ours.
that?
That was ours.
That was us.
That was probably ours. Yeah.
And what is it?
If I'm using Stephen Greer's logic, that was ours. That was our
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, it's our stuff. They
We
just
got
made the
things.
jump to hyperspace. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, nothing to see here. Like that when you see that, you're like, well, obviously we have technology they haven't told us about, but I literally got to see
Yes,
it with
we
my
do.
own eyes. And I'd
Yes,
love to
we
sit
do.
here and say I was smoking crack something, folks, or I was 18 beers deep, but I was dead
No.
sober. I was just driving. I was like,
I,
that is
I
wild.
said this on your last show, bro. I said this on your last show, and I'll say it again. 20 years ago, when I was a captain, I saw technology that will never make the light of day, and it was very advanced way back then. I can tell you unequivocally there's technology we have that has not been released. And I've said this on your show before, too.
I know.
You know, we're, 50 years since we went to the moon, and we're still using brute force rockets to go to space? Get out of here. Come on. Get out of here. Sorry. You look at jet development from prop airplanes in 1918, 1919 to 1945. We were in jets in less than 20 years. Then we were in supersonic jets from the 50s until 70s, and then we got hypersonic. So you tell me we haven't advanced past hypersonic and rockets? Get out of here. Come on. There's obviously something they don't want to release because they know it's going to change the course of human history. And I would rather imagine that technology is anti-gravitic. I think we mastered it in the 60s and the 70s, and I mean, think about it this way. We've been operating the 737 and the 767, the 787, or the 777 since the 70s and 80s. And here we are 35, 40 years later, we're still flying the 37. That thing's been flying for a long time. That production line in Renton has been going on almost 30, 40 years. And you're telling me we can't find a technology better than that, more fuel efficient, faster, quieter. You're telling me we can't. I'm telling you, the airline industry, whether it's archaic or not, they still want to innovate too. And where did all the R&D go? Where did all of the think tanks go that were thinking of new technology? You think they've been working on drones for the last 30 years? You think they've been, killing themselves to come up with micro technology? I'm sure there's part of it, but we literally stopped evolving from a technology perspective in the 80s. We haven't really excelled past that except for AI and computer technology. But you're telling me that computer technology and all that AI can't come up with a better aircraft design than what we have now to move people faster, farther? I mean, come on. You just start looking at it from that perspective, and you look at the leaps that we've made, and we made exponential leaps from 1918 to 1945. Then we made another exponential leap into the 70s when we got the SR-71, and that was done in the 50s, 60s. You're telling me past the SR-71, we never came up with something that could go faster than 6 or 7 times the speed of sound? That was one of the fastest aircraft ever made, and we don't have anything better? I mean, there's lots of theories around it. like the B2. If you notice, we haven't replaced the B2. It's supposed to be the B-21, but they're lagging and dragging their feet on it. I wonder why that is. Is it because we have something better? And then start looking at all the missing money. We were missing what, $2 trillion back in 2000 and 2001. So ask yourself the question, where the money go? I'm telling you, Stephen Greer's right about one thing. There is off the books programs, and those off the books programs have technology that we probably can't imagine. And
You
I'm go ahead.
you brought up Panama.
Yeah.
And you said it might go kinetic or that it's on its way there. One of the things, I'd been lightly paying attention to. It's hard to keep up some days, Steve. But the fact that Trump was talking about the Panama Canal, and then I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that he was teaming up with BlackRock to basically buy different ports or to buy everything around the Panama Canal. What are your thoughts on that?
So Trump has again yet another existential crisis, right? You have the same. Canada has the same problem. We have to kick the Chinese out of North America. They've infiltrated North America. They did it through the Bidens. They did it through Obama. They did it through the Clintons. They all took the money. At least, it sure appears that way. I know the Bidens did, but they've bought up a lot of the ports. I don't know if you realize this, but the Chinese own a tremendous number of ports across the planet. In the background, while all of us were busy with hockey and football and all the other, nonsense that we spend our time on, the Chinese were running around the planet for the last 20 years, buying up mineral rights, buying up mining rights, buying up waterways, water rights, buying up farmland. They were buying ports, they were buying technology centers, and Panama is a strategic hub for not only us, but for all of North America. And when Carter gave the canal away, first of all, it was a violation of the treaty we signed with them back in the 30s, and an act of treason. But at the same time, it opened the door for our adversaries to come in and control a sea line of communication. Uh, Across the planet, there's multiple sea lines of communication: the Suez Canal, the South China Sea, the Panama Canal, a number of different places that are strategic lines of communication and sea lines of communication that we need to protect. Panama is an existential part of North America. So Trump is using, I'm sure didn't give BlackRock he didn't give him the choice. He probably told Larry Fink, you're going to go down there and you're going to purchase those ports because you have the capital to do it. We'll get you on the other side, but right now we want control of those ports. You're going to do it financially because remember, the Chinese are building a bridge across the Darien Gap and a road through the Darien Gap so they can continue infiltration into North America. So Trump has to kick them out. Step one is to control the ports. Step two is to control the canal. Step three is to put forces on the ground to protect the canal. So that's what's going on right now. And the Panamanians that have taken the money from Chinese, they're the ones that are fighting back, causing the riots right now. Michael Yon's been on the ground, and if you go 2 days ago, Michael Yon was on Alex Jones. You should go watch that interview. It's about an hour and a half long, but I guarantee you, I talk to Michael Yon every day, and that guy knows exactly what's going on the ground because he's been in the Darien Gap since 2020 when all this started, and he's seen an influx of Chinese. And we sat down one night and tried to figure out how many people have crossed the border. My team and I estimate between 30 and 35 million have come across the border since 2020. He estimates somewhere of 42 million. Because it's not just the numbers that we engage with. It's not just the numbers flowing across the Panama Canal. Remember, we were flying them in, we were bringing them in on boats, we were bringing them in every way, shape, and form we could have. So the numbers we saw are probably a tenth of what was really brought into the country. And we were building houses for them. We've got entire communities in Texas and other parts of the country that are all illegals that have been put into houses and given low interest loans as well as a monthly stipend. And hopefully Trump's cutting all that off right now. So the whole point of it is to cut the flow of both the illegal aliens coming in, weapons coming in, and everything else, including fentanyl coming through the Darien Gap. And that's the other part of it is all of it feeds into the border. So he's trying to slow the tide coming up from South America, but he's also trying to cut the Chinese off, and he's trying to cut off the supply going to the fentanyl labs in Mexico. And you guys have a fentanyl problem too, which I'm pretty sure is a catastrophe by now. So that's where the tariffs come in. And he's been given a lot of flack about the tariffs, but when you think about it, it's a brilliant idea because you make it more expensive for everybody around you to operate, and by the same token, it's the best leverage. So we'll see how that goes. There's a lot of different pros and cons to it, and I think he's onto something. But the real answer is we have to stop the flow of drugs. We have to do something about the narco state that is Mexico, because it's not just Mexico. It's all of the southwest borders, right? Our governor here, I can tell you, Katie Hobbs, she was installed by the cartels, along with Adrian Fontes, former cartel lawyer, the the mayors in every city, the not the sheriffs, because there's I know all the sheriffs, and they're actually, with the exception of Maricopa County, are all good sheriffs. But the point is, the narco state has to be dealt with, and that's what all these pieces add up to. Think of it as a chess game. He's setting conditions right now so he can attack and starve the cartels out of all their resources. And that's what all these moves are about right now. Regain control of sea lines of operation, regain control of the border, and then interdict all of the narco trafficking that's coming across, including human trafficking. That's where it's all going. Now, does it turn into a hot war? Does it turn into a kinetic war? At some point, yes. But the question is, what is that going to look like when it does turn into that? And, Bracken's talked about that ad nauseum. So is Ian Burlingame. Those guys have talked about it ad nauseum. Uh, I don't know what that's going to metastasize to, but it's going to metastasize into something. It's not, think of the cartels as a malignant tumor. It is going to grow and grow and grow until you cut it off and cut it out. And Trump is setting conditions so he can do that. I don't know about the distraction over in Yemen and what that clown show's all about, but that to me is a military blunder as well as a tactical blunder. But our focus should be on the border, and they should be on the cartels, because that fight's going to take 10 years, and it's going to be right here in the streets, because the cartels are everywhere. They go all the way up to Washington State and into Canada. The Sinaloa cartel does, at least, and there's 5 other cartels that go throughout the Southwest, all the way into the South, and all the way up to New England. They have supply routes all the way through this country. They have safe houses all the way through this country. They have their own intelligence apparatus. They have their own logistics apparatus. This is not some, run of the mill organization that we're dealing with. This isn't a terror cell. This is a very organized, very mature operation that's very, very violent. And I think Trump realizes that, and the people around Trump realize that. And I think that's why they're setting conditions to cut them off so that they can't logistically move. And I think they know where all the funding sources are too. So that, in a nutshell, is why Panama is so important. And it's not just important for dealing with the cartels in China, it's also our main shipping thoroughfare into the Caribbean. And, you'd be surprised how much shipping that comes into this country, and we still ship things by rail to the East Coast from Western ports, and then put it on ships on the East Coast and ship it across, because it's faster than using the canal. And even with the canal traffic at a moderate pace, there's still cheaper to go across the country via rail lines and then put it onto the ship and send it to Europe. So there's a lot of reasons why Panama is very, very important, and traffic flow is just one of them.
Yeah, getting moving of goods. When you talk about getting around the continent, having that, it's just a strategic location, I guess, is what I'm trying to spit out.
Uh-huh.
You
Vital
know,
to our strategic interests. Vital.
did,
We should
did,
have never given it up.
why did you guys give it up? Why did Carter? You said Carter gave it away.
I think so. Back in the 70s, when a lot of these institutional politicians came to power, and I'll even go back to the 60s, when we started offshoring all of our production, we started offshoring all of our manufacturing. that was really the start of the move away from the U.S. being a net manufacturer, net exporter to a net importer. And I think that the prevailing wisdom at the time, I don't know exactly what the conversation was. I've read so many different variations around his thought process. And it wasn't because he was a bleeding heart liberal that thought it was unfair that we had control of the canal. That's not even a factor in this. There was obviously foreign interests as well as domestic interests that thought that it was a good idea to give up the canal. But really, I think the canal was given up just so they could enable a lot of the human trafficking that's been going on, in open view in the last 4 years. That's been going on since we gave the canal away. I mean, we limited a lot of different things by occupying the canal. One of them was um, we were domesticating, well, I don't want to say domesticating, but we were eliminating flies that embed themselves and destroy cattle. And we had an entire operation set up that we were doing for years and years and years out of Panama to restrict and kill off this one specific fly. And all of that stopped in 2020. And up until then, we still had some presence in the region. We were still monitoring. But once we walked away, the human traffickers and the drug traffickers from South America was just a direct road all the way up to the US. And I think that Trump's realized, along with some of the elite, that we need to get it back and keep it this time. And I'm thankful for it because I've seen the amount of stuff that's come across the border, not just humans, weapons, drugs, you name it. It's just an open door. So military's job is to defend our borders. So they should be doing that right now, and I think they are. We just got to get rid of the distraction that is the Middle East and get out of there entirely, and leave it to the Middle East countries to figure it out. But that's just my opinion. I know that there's a lot of strategic interests in Central America that we can solve by taking the canal back. We can solve communication problems. We can shut down human trafficking. We can shut down a lot of the drug trafficking, but we still have to deal with the cartels in Mexico. And once we do that, the whole region will level out if we do it right. Now, does that mean we invade Mexico? At some point, yes. At some point, we're going to have to go down there and reestablish government. Because you're talking about decades of cartel control of that government. I mean, this has been going on. The drug trade's been going on, since the 60s? I mean, in earnest, since the 60s. So we're talking 60 years of cartels running the world. That the only way to change that, you got to root them out and get rid of them all. And I think Trump's got the stones to do it. He just doesn't have the military right now to do it. How's that for a mouthful?
Well, it's funny. I come back to I don't know why I come back to right where we started from, and I think about the conversation that's happening in Alberta specifically right now, and that is Alberta, the 51st state. There's a lot of appetite here for, I would say, independence away from Canada, but with people, when you talk about just securing resources and on and on and on. When you look at Alberta and what it offers the world, it is quite insane from a resources standpoint. And there is growing sentiment that, like on the simplest of terms, Steve, people would just flip over to American state tomorrow if you just gave them the American dollar. They're just like, just give us the dollar. Just switch my dollars over to American. I'd be right. That is maybe the naivety of some of the voters, right? Like, just if they just gave me that, I'd go. Give me their rights, and I go, right? Like, they don't think. And in fairness, maybe none of us are thinking further along than just that. And I don't know why I come back to that, but you're talking about going down and cleaning up Mexico. On the northern side, the issue is a corrupt government. That, to me, that's what it looks like. I could be a bit wrong on my assessment,
No.
but certainly
your government's a cesspool of pedophiles and idiots that are controlled by the World
And so
Economic Forum. So they all
the
need to go.
the
Christopher
Alberta,
Freeland,
yes.
really? What a
Well,
cokehead!
so I look at
come
it
on.
and you look at it, and Albertans are like, maybe there's going to be a possibility if Carney does get in. He calls an election here in 4 days and gets back in. The separatist movement of Western Canada, specifically in Alberta, is going to go as I keep saying, supersonic. And what does that look like? And where does that take us closer to? And there's a
I
lot of
think
talk.
I,
Sure.
I'll just I think you're going to have that choice in the near future. I think you're going to make that choice, either the EU or the US. I think you're really going to make that choice. I don't think all of Canada is going to go that way because there's a lot of liberal retards in Vancouver.
Well, I think the liberal
Too
retards
many.
would want to go Europe. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, right? Go to Europe. But that said, I think you might see that in the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, if this boils over the way I think it's going to. Because whatever this dick waving contest is going on between the European elites and the US elites, it's all about currency. It's all about debt. It's all about restructuring, et cetera. That's why they want World War III so bad. You know, Keir Starmer thinks he's going to send his 40,000 gay British troops over to Ukraine and fight the Russians. Let me know how that works out for you. It's not going to work out the way you think it is. And then you're going to go stop the Russians from um, going to Paris. Okay, I hate to break it to you, but the Russians lost the fight. They didn't win the fight in Ukraine. A bunch of dudes in their basement with a 3D printer created enough drones to stop them dead in their tracks, and they did it on their own volition. So give me a break with that. The Russians aren't going anywhere past the Dnieper River. And if you think that I'm crazy, look at how long it took them. They went into Kursk a year ago, last year. I mean, and they went into Kursk for no reason. But look at how long it took them to get them out of there. If this is the big bad Russian army, why aren't they rolling across the steppe into Kiev by now? I'll tell you why. Because they can't do maneuver warfare. So that whole line is a bunch of BS, and everybody's starting to see through it, right? The thing that I think most people on the planet want to see is they want to see the death stop, right? I know how much waste is in war, but we've seen 600,000 casualties on the Ukrainian side. I don't know how many on the Russian side, plus 2 million wounded, and some of them wounded forever. They're never going to recover. And tell me how that's benefited Ukraine. Tell me how it's benefited Russia. It's a stalemate. As much as you want to tell me the Russians are moving, they might be moving, but they're not moving yards. They're moving inches. And if they were really the big bad Russian army, they would have rolled over the Ukrainians. They would have sent in 20 divisions, and they would have gone right to Kiev on day one if they were serious. So that whole thing doesn't add up to anything other than people want to see an end to the war. They want to see an end to the killing. They want to just see it, move away from what it is now. But that said, they're trying to instigate World War III so they can write down the debt. I mean, Tom's spot on when he talks about that. Both he and Alex are dialed into that, right? The politics in Germany, politics in the UK, the EU, they're dialed in. That's exactly what's going on. But on the other side of that, the U.S. trying to broker a peace deal, and what it really looks like is it's who's going to crash first, which economy. It's a game of chicken to see which economy is going to crash first. And the longer that we delay, the longer that we force the hand of Europe, the more likely it is they're going to crash first. And then the Chinese will go, and it'll probably start in Japan, to be perfectly honest, because I think Tom's right about that. So I'm looking at all these indicators. I'm thinking by bringing Canada into the EU gives them direct access so they can monetize the resources, they can revalue Canadian dollar, and they can revalue the euro. So I think at some point you probably are going to see that conversation turn into something real, and then it really will be a real conversation around, do we secede from the union and do we go to become the 51st state? And I can tell you that will happen overnight if Trump's given the opportunity. That will happen absolutely overnight.
Well, what I can tell you here, sitting here right now, as I sit, like just not knowing, like the EU thing came out of left field, right? Like I was like, oh, okay.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
Fair enough.
Not at all.
What the way that the conversations are going on this side, Steve, is if Carney gets in, let's just play out the scenario where he wins an election, steals an election, take whatever word you want, but he is the next prime minister for the next 4 years. You are going to see in Alberta specifically this rising tide of people that are interested in the conversation about the 51st state. And if
You
that
don't think
hasn't hit,
any other territories? You don't think any other territories are gonna move that direction?
I think they will, but it'll be Alberta that makes the first step.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and the thing
Yeah.
about it is if that I'm watching Trump right now. He's on Fox News and he says, "Oh yeah, I think what's his exact words, folks? He wants a liberal government." I'm just chuckling. I'm like, man, if you're a liberal and you hate Trump and you hear Trump say that, like now you're in a
What does
real.
that mean, a liberal government, though? What does that mean in Trump terms?
Well, I assume that
That's the
means Mark
question.
Carney, right? That's the current government in right now.
Yeah.
Or do you hear something different?
I've learned with Trump that the stuff that comes out of his mouth is usually a troll. So does he want a liberal government? Probably for the sense that he knows they're going to drive towards the EU and he's going to take some of the property. That's how that guy works. Yeah, I really want a liberal government, which means go ahead, Duke, make your stupid moves. I'll take half your country because they'll willingly come over to us. That's exactly what he's saying. That's how
Well,
I read it.
well, that's funny because I was sitting here chatting with Bo before we came in here, and I'm like, well, why would he do that? I'm like, because he understands if a liberal government gets back in, there's a good chance that Alberta willingly just says, "Peace. We would prefer to be down south and
Uh-huh.
take everything we have with it."
Yep. And I think that well, I wouldn't say down south. I would say get ready for an influx of Americans that are coming up to start businesses, build
Sure.
border checkpoints, et cetera, right? Because that's exactly what's going to happen. And I don't think that's going to be the only territory that says, "Yep, we're out. Love you." I think
No,
you're
well,
going to
here's the thing: is if Alberta goes, there will be more that go. But
absolutely,
it starts with Alberta.
yeah.
And the thing about people coming up here, they at this point, I think there's a lot of things that would be a welcome addition. Now, in fairness, there's a lot of people who just want independence, right? I don't want to be governed by the states. I don't want to be governed by Canada. I just want to govern ourselves, right? But if Carney gets in, all that sentiment is going to boil over. It boiled over in 2019. 2019 when Trudeau got elected for the second time. Overnight, it was just this huge. The rooms were full of people wanting to go. But now you have Trump sitting to the south, who we both know. And I guess
Let
he
me
was there. I mean, he was there at that time too.
let
He's
me
just
bend your brain for a second on this one.
sure.
Here's something you haven't thought about. What if it's all a script? What if it's all just a theater act so that they can unify Canada and the US and create an economic zone? What if it's just a script? What if Trump's playing his part?
Why do you
Carney's
think I
playing his
brought you
part?
on?
Yeah, that's if you wanted me to look at this from a information warfare perspective, to
Hmm.
me it's all a script. All this is just a clever choreographed dance so they can create the conflict internationally, they can create the conflict between countries, they can run the script out. Everybody signs up to be one big happy country. And guess what? They got their agenda 2030. They didn't have to fire a shot. Done deal. Because Mark Carney is World Economic Forum. He's
Correct.
he's BlackRock, World Economic Forum. That's the U.S. and that's Larry Fink. That's the East Coast Mafia. That's the World Economic Forum. That's the Davos Mafia. They're all in bed together. It's birds of the same feather. So to me, it's just a big game. It's a big
So
shell game.
if you were sitting here in your Alberta and you're unhappy, what would you do then?
I would want to rule myself. Like I would if Arizona, I secede from the union. Go fuck yourselves. We're gonna rule ourselves. This will be the independent country of um, Guntardistan, and we're gonna do our own thing. Nice knowing you. Because look, we have resources here. Water's our issue, right? But you could negotiate water, and there's lots of things we could do to self-rule, right? That's what I would go for first. Why? Because if I see the unification of the northern hemisphere, I already know the game's up. And then it becomes an insurgency at that point. I don't want to fight an insurgency. I'd rather disrupt their plans wholesale and just start taking pieces off the board they can't control.
Is Trump a part of like when you
I
go
don't
to
know. He's looking more and more like a Zionist cuck right now because of all this Israel talk. Did you watch his convention? His convention was literally Make Israel Great Again. They were like chanting on the last night of his convention. Like, are you shitting me? I didn't sign up for this. And yet people vote him in. He's doing the best job in the world. What if he's owned? He sure looks like he's owned by Israel. Everything he's doing right, like we're bombing the Houthis. We're dropping $1 million bombs on guys that are using $100,000 drones. Really? That's the best we can do? We got 3 carrier battle groups moving over to engage Iran. Why? Iran has made no provocative moves. The only reason we're there is because Israel wants us to go to war. Specifically, Netanyahu wants us to go to war with Iran. They've wanted us to go to war with Iran for the last 20 years. And you think that this is outside the realm of possibility that all this is a script to get people to sign up for a one world government? My view of the whole situation is communism didn't sell. So now they bring in the moderates and they try and sell it to us under the guise of we're going to unify countries because we can't get along. Come on. It's the same script. I said this before. It's worth saying again. Read Pawns in the Game by William Carr. You read that book, I guarantee you all this stuff will look crystal clear. But I think it's all a script. I think Trump is completely owned. And look at his cabinet. Everybody in his cabinet is like hyper pro Israel. I'm not any of those things. I'm all about restoring the Constitution, maintaining the Constitution, and most importantly, maintaining our sovereignty, just like maintaining the sovereignty of the nations around us, because we're stronger as independent countries than we are as a unified nation. Can you imagine how much control and span of control that the government would have if they created a national police force? Just round up all the liberals and all these foreign nationals, and guess what? You have an entire army of people that are not loyal to any constitution or any country, and they will do whatever they're told to do and then some. We've seen this play out in how many different countries across the planet? That's exactly what they're angling towards. And I think with the tech bros and now infiltrating into DOD and the competition to get away from the big conglomerate defense contractors, I think what you're seeing is in the background, they're building a technocracy. They're building the control grid in the background. They've been doing it since the start of COVID. So I don't think there's any change in anything. And the reason why I say that is here we are, 58 days in, nobody's been perp walked. We know treason's occurred. The Bidens committed treason. Obama committed treason. The CIA, most of the CIA and FBI committed treason. The Clintons definitely committed treason. The Bushes committed treason. Nobody's investigating anything. Pam Bondi's still trying to find the Epstein files, which, by the way, are all digitized, but they have to redact them. See where I'm going with that? I mean, it's all a big show. It's all a big script. It's all a bunch of misdirection. Like, look at how much of the public consciousness right now is absorbed with JFK. The dude died in 62. The files have been there since 62. You don't think they've deleted stuff? Come on. It's all a bunch of BS. The whole thing's a show. And I think it's a show to drive us into the control grid. But like I said, if disclosure happens and we get some of these technologies that are released and we see some of the things behind the curtain, I guarantee you their control grid evaporates overnight.
Did I ever tell you I enjoy having you on? I enjoy having you on.
Why is that? Because I bend your braining?
Well, you think differently than different. You know, you're. When I look at bringing on different guests to talk about different subjects or just the world in general, North America, you can go wherever you want with it. Is what makes my job, and I think as an audience, I can speak for the audience. If you're going to listen to things, if you hear the same thing over and over again, you're like, but something just doesn't add up. Like, wait a second, you telling me? And you do a very good job of giving a different perspective. And I think for a lot of people, they get to sit back and go, that kind of makes sense. Like, I hadn't thought about that, right? Like this all going together, and we're all going to be under one big giant harmonious country. I think
that should scare the shit out of everybody. Why would somebody think that's a good thing? When the government says we're here to help, you're going to be better off by us doing something, you should turn around and reach for the nearest rifle and just fire indiscriminately before you reload and ask, what did you just say? That's how bad that is. That's somebody coming across your perimeter and he's got a bigger gun than you do, but he's telling you he's just here to help. No, sorry. There's no part of this government that even across the planet, there's no part of any government right now that's doing anything beneficial for their people. Even El Salvador, which seems to be the most peaceful place on the planet right now, right? 20 years ago, El Salvador was the highest deaths, you know, fatalities per year in the world, and now all of a sudden it's the safest place in the world. No, I I believe in two things that have helped me throughout my career, because in the cyber business, you have to think outside the box. You have to think the pieces fit together and figure out how they fit together, even though you think they don't, because they usually do. And I've learned that especially cyber criminals, they're adaptive, they're creative, and they're agile. They can move, they can shoot, move, and communicate faster than we can. And I'm looking at all of these different pieces, and I'm like, why would they fit together? What would benefit the world elite? If these pieces fit together and people did it willingly, that fits their agenda. They don't have to fire a shot. Because look, prior to November, everybody here was gearing up for civil war. I'm telling you, I was telling people in October, travel heavy, meaning carry a rifle, carry ammunition, carry a plate carrier, be ready to go into action anytime, anywhere. Because as soon as Biden gets back in office, or Harris, or whichever flunky they were going to put up, guess what? Civil war. And it was going to be civil war. And let me let me go a step further. One of the things as an officer you don't want to hear, especially in peacetime, sir, what are your orders? That is a soldier asking you, who am I going to go attack? And I heard that literally every week for 11 weeks prior to the election. You don't think that's a strong indicator that we are going to go to war? We were poised for civil war, and the elite knew it. They knew they had to change their playbook because it wasn't selling. And they know that an activated, armed American public, who said it the best? Yamamoto. He said, I fear we have awoken a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. That's exactly where the American public was. And look at them now. They haven't released the Epstein files. Nobody's been perp walked. Wait till 90 days from now. People are going to be pissed off, and they're going to be ready to go off the reservation.
You
That's why I
think
say, I think if we don't get disclosure, there's going to be a revolution.
so?
And I think it's,
When
go
you
ahead.
when you look at Trump being shot in the head, you think he was shot in the head, correct?
I I have my doubts about it, and I'll tell you why. Because, okay, option one, legitimate, the Secret Service, the FBI, and a certain number of nefarious players. They say Josh Shapiro had a play in it, whatever. All that's real. Option two, it's staged. They have a sniper team that's in a different location that shoots, and again, that's a hell of a shot because you're talking about distance, wind to get that close. But here's the part that sticks in my craw. I can't account for the rest of it. But he shows up with that big, my pillow on his ear at the convention like 3 days later. I'm like, dude, really? There was never any publicity or pictures of the wound. There was never a doctor's briefing about the wound and his health condition. There was never any kind of a briefing about any other injuries he might have sustained, because there was multiple shots fired. There were people killed behind him. So there's more questions than answers to that. And I have my doubts about any of it. And given the fact that I think everything's a script anyway, I they could have shot close to him, and they could have had a blood capsule on his ear that popped and dripped down his face. Because remember, he drops down behind the podium. We don't see anything. He comes up, he's got blood on his face. How do you know that's real? Did anybody verify? Did a doctor come out and say the guy was wounded? No, it was just Trump and his team. So you can make all like the left thinks it was all staged. It was all theater. Okay. The people that were shot in the background, they could have been paid actors. They could have been real. Who knows? Did we ever hear the names of those people? It's like Maui. It's like California. What happened to the families? A fire sweeps through Lahaina. Like literally, I was there 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior to that. And literally, fire sweeps through that place. We don't know how many people died. We don't know how many children died. And we've never heard from any of the families. You're telling me that a major catastrophe happens like that, we don't hear from the families? It's the same thing. Where's the doctor report about the wound? I'm suspect of everything, but that was like there was way too many questions there. And given the fact that the Secret Service didn't have control of that place, like that rooftop, come on. I'd have had 3 snipers and a SWAT team on that rooftop, and nobody would have even got close to it. And you're telling me this guy crawls up there, people are pointing to him, and all of a sudden he pops off a shot that hits Trump here? Get out of here. Get the fuck out of here. I think the whole thing was number one, it could be either one. It could be staged or it could be real. I don't know. But there's more questions than answers to all of it. And, when we went through it originally, I said the same thing. We don't know enough. There's not enough information about any of the aspects of it to really make a definitive case either way. And if we look at all the other attempts on him, all these other attempts were failed attempts because these guys were amateurs. If you're going to send somebody to kill a guy you know is going to be the president of the United States, are you going to send an amateur or are you going to send a pro?
Pro.
Because you're going against the Secret Service. You're going to send a guy that knows how to infiltrate, take the shot, and get out clean. And trust me, there's plenty of those guys around. There's a lot of trained, very highly skilled snipers out there that could have popped him and capped him a new asshole in the forehead, and nobody would have thought wiser of it. And they would have done it on national TV. So I have my doubts about all of it. I don't know where the truth lies, but I look at everything with suspect eyes, and the more that things are starting to move in certain directions, I'm thinking, yeah, that could have been staged. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think everything we're seeing right now is theater, pure and simple theater. I don't think it's anything else. I don't think it's a coincidence that Pam Bondi screwed up and dropped. First of all, she dropped 8.5 by 11 binders with a bunch of papers that say these are the Epstein files when they were digitized back in 2011. Come on. I mean, it's not even good theater. Like, I like my bullshit freshly packaged and well delivered if I'm going to buy into it, right? This isn't even well packaged. It's bullshit. Come on. You can do better than that. I could do better than that. That's what I'm seeing right now. And the worst part of all of this is you could be skeptical, but there's so many people that have made Trump into a deity that you can't talk him off the ledge. And that's the part where if this really was an attempt, even if it was faked, it had the desired effect. The desired effect was to make him untouchable, to make him unbeatable. That event in July galvanized the American public, galvanized them. It's what I call a green flag. You conduct an attack that galvanizes the public. 9/11. And what did we find out about 9/11? That there was a bunch of Israeli students that were all over the World Trade Center prior to that going into prior to the aircraft hitting the building, quote unquote. So you could make the case either way, right? I tend to lean on the side of more cynical, and I think that if I was a betting man, I'd say that there's a lot of theater around that too. Just by the way, he was rushed out of there. There's no doctor. I mean, go back to Reagan. When there was an attempt on Reagan's life and he was actually shot, how every hour, almost every hour on the hour, there was a press briefing about the president's condition, about his wound. And as they got more and more detail, every press briefing got more and more detail. We saw none of that with Trump. You would think that a major player in a presidential election would garner at least 1 or 2 TV channels to come out and say, here's his condition. We didn't see any of that. That's why I say you can take it either way.
Never a dull moment. I kept you past time. Steve, thanks for hopping on and doing this. Won't be the last time. Appreciate your thoughts on this side.
Yeah, I hope when your audience heads explode that you'll funnel all that traffic traffic over to me to answer the questions.
We will. we will. Thanks again.